Hey everyone, are you looking to enhance your YouTube experience and stay up to date with the latest and greatest content? Then make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Now sit back and enjoy the story.
I had always known that Ohio was a strange place to live, but I never imagined it could be so terrifying. It started when I moved into an old Victorian house in the heart of the city. It had a strange energy about it, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. At first, I brushed it off as just the usual creaks and groans of an old house settling. But as time went on, the noises became more frequent and more ominous. Sometimes it sounded like footsteps pacing back and forth in the hallway outside my bedroom. Other times, it was the sound of whispers coming from the walls. One night, I woke up to find my bedroom door wide open. I knew for a fact that I had locked it before going to bed, so I couldn't explain how it had opened on its own. I tried to brush it off as a draft, but as I lay back down, I heard a faint humming coming from somewhere in the house. The humming grew louder and more intense, and I could feel it vibrating through the floorboards. I sat up in bed, trying to figure out where it was coming from, when suddenly, a dark figure appeared in my doorway. I couldn't make out any features, but I could feel its eyes boring into me. The humming grew even louder, and I could hear a faint chanting coming from outside the house. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or even scream. The figure slowly moved closer to me, and I could feel its cold breath on my face. I closed my eyes, hoping it would go away, but when I opened them again, it was still there, staring at me with its soulless eyes. Suddenly, the chanting outside grew louder, and the figure disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. I was left alone in my room, the humming and chanting fading away into the night. I never did figure out what had caused those strange occurrences in my house, but I knew one thing for sure: Ohio was not a place to be taken lightly. There were forces at work there that I couldn't even begin to comprehend, and I was just lucky to have survived my encounter with them. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak, every whisper, made me jump out of my skin. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that I was overreacting to the strange occurrences in my house. But deep down, I knew that something wasn't right. I started doing some research on the history of the house and the surrounding area. What I found sent shivers down my spine. The house had been built in the late 1800s by a wealthy businessman who was rumored to be involved in the occult. There were stories of strange rituals being performed in the house, and even rumors of human sacrifice. As I delved deeper into the history of the area, I discovered that there were a number of unexplained disappearances and deaths in the vicinity of the house. Some people had vanished without a trace, while others had been found dead under mysterious circumstances. I began to wonder if the strange occurrences in my house were connected to this dark history. Maybe the figure that I had seen was a ghost or some other malevolent entity that had been summoned by the occult practices of the past. As time went on, the occurrences in my house became more frequent and more terrifying. Objects would move on their own, doors would slam shut, and I would hear voices whispering my name in the dead of night. One particularly frightening incident occurred when I was home alone. I was in the kitchen, making dinner, when I heard a loud banging coming from the basement. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that it was just the pipes, but the banging grew louder and more insistent. I mustered up the courage to go down to the basement and investigate. As I descended the stairs, I could feel a cold draft coming from below. The banging grew louder and more frenzied, and I could hear a faint chanting coming from somewhere in the darkness. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw a figure standing in the corner, shrouded in darkness. Its eyes glowed red, and its voice was deep and guttural. It spoke in a language that I couldn't understand, and I could feel its malevolent energy radiating outwards. I turned and ran back up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind me. I could hear the figure pounding on the door, trying to get out. I knew that I had to get out of the house, but I was too scared to move. Eventually, the pounding stopped, and the chanting faded away into silence. I sat there trembling until the sun came up. I knew then that I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I packed my bags and left Ohio, never looking back. But the memory of that dark figure and the strange occurrences in that Victorian house still haunts me to this day. Years later, I found myself back in Ohio for a business trip. I had tried my best to forget about the horrors I had experienced in that old house, but as soon as I set foot in the city, I could feel the same eerie energy that had haunted me before. Despite my reservations, I decided to stay in a hotel near the old Victorian house. I told myself that I was being silly, that nothing would happen, but as soon as I entered the hotel room, I knew that I was wrong. The room was cold and dark, with an oppressive energy that made it hard to breathe. I could hear whispers coming from the walls, and I could feel eyes watching me from the shadows. That night, I had a vivid nightmare. I was back in the old house, and the dark figure was standing in front of me, its eyes glowing red. It spoke to me in the same guttural language, and I could feel its malevolent energy pulsing through me. I woke up in a cold sweat, and that's when I saw it. The figure was standing in the corner of my hotel room, watching me with those same soulless eyes. I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. I could feel its cold breath on my face, and I knew that I was in danger. Suddenly, the figure disappeared, and the whispers faded away into silence. But I knew that it was only a matter of time before it came back. I left Ohio the next day, never to return again. But the memory of that night still haunts me, and I know that I'll never be able to forget the horrors that I experienced in that strange and terrifying place.